So now, let's get into it with My Funny House. Here are your hosts, Frank and Mark Powell on The Answer San Diego.
Good morning, this is Frank and welcome to My Funny House with Mark Powell.
This is Mark
Thanks so
Powell.
much for joining us.
Good morning, Frank. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. What do you want to do today?
Well, today we're going to talk about some serious issues and make them funny because everything in real estate is serious and sometimes you have some humor in them. Today we're going to talk about renting a place. And this isn't what people may think right away of going out and renting a place. This has to do with a lease back, or maybe you need a roommate
Right.
to help pay off your mortgage in case you're the only one living in a 3-bedroom and you decide maybe if I get a couple roommates. And we're going to talk about what can go right and what can go wrong.
Yeah, it can go really wrong sometimes when you have problems with a renter in a room.
So let's talk about that. Mark, let me give you a scenario which we deal with all the time. When you sell a house and you're going to buy another house, there's always a period where you can't time it, like the time your escrow closes.
Correct.
And the time that money has to go pay for the house you're going to move into.
Correct.
So sometimes there's a 1 or 2 week or maybe even 3 week or a month delay, and the people aren't ready to move because they don't want to really move into a hotel room. So their option is what?
Well, you have a couple of options. So if you're selling your house and you need to remain in possession of the house after close of escrow, there's a special form that you can fill out. It's called seller to remain in possession of the house after close of escrow. However, it can only go for up to 30 days because after 30 days, you then become a tenant and you'll need a lease agreement. And that opens up a whole can of worms when you have a lease agreement. If you're the former owner, now you're not the owner, you're the renter.
Okay, so let's say I have a mortgage and I've been paying it for years. So my mortgage is only $2,000 a month or $2,500. But the guy who buys a house, he's going to have to pay a higher mortgage. How do you determine what you're going to charge that person to rent it back for that 30 days?
So what happens in that situation is they calculate something called PITI, which is principal, interest, tax, and insurance. So whenever you get a loan, that's what you're going to be paying. You'll pay the principal, interest, tax, and insurance. So typically what they'll do is they'll calculate what that is per day, per diem, and charge whatever it is, $125 a day for however many days, up to 30 days.
Okay, so let's say I don't like that because I want you to pay what my new mortgage is going to be, not what your old mortgage is. Do you have options or what can happen?
Well, you can tell them, you can just say no. You can say
no, you got to leave the premises,
You gotta
close
leave.
of escrow, I want it.
Yeah, correct.
So there's some options for the person buying it because now what I would think, people would be nervous, it's now my house.
Right.
I don't want to be liable in case, what if they damaged the house accidentally or what if they got injured accidentally while it's
Correct.
my house now?
Correct.
So these are the things you got to consider when you're buying and if you want to rent it back.
And oftentimes, the most realistic situation is a seller will say, hey, I need a couple of extra days in the property just to get the stuff out. It's just really stressful. Can I have 2 days? So seller to remain in possession for 2 days after close of escrow is very appropriate. But when it starts to get longer than that, then you can put yourself in for some liability if you're that buyer.
Really quick, I'm going to take 15 seconds to explain what close of escrow is. What is escrow? Because people just don't know that. And they're embarrassed to ask what an escrow company is. So an escrow company is a neutral company that makes sure both sides are doing what they say they're going to do according to what is written in the contract. So if you look, it'll say residential purchase agreement and escrow instructions.
Yes.
So that means that the escrow company, to make it really easy, I want to buy a bicycle from you. You want to give me the money, but I want to make sure the bike's okay. So we both agree to get a mutual friend. I'll give him the bike, you give him the money, and I make sure the bike's
Correct.
okay, and then that mutual friend exchanges it. So that's all the escrow company is. It's a mutual company that helps both sides make sure.
They make sure that everything that was written in the purchase contract is done. So if they say you owe a $10,000 deposit after 3 days, they're going to
Boom, they got to call
make
you.
sure.
Where's
Yeah.
your money?
Where's the money? Right.
Another one is proof of funds. If you're going to say you're going to put $20,000 on a house, they want this thing called POF, proof of funds, which is show me the money. I don't I don't want it to be property in Mexico that you haven't sold yet that's worth $1 million. I want it to be in the bank cash that I can get to.
Correct.
Even a 401k can screw you up because a person may not realize the tax implications and go, oh, I can't put that much money down. So that's why I want to.
Hey, I have a question for you
Go ahead.
before we bring on our guests here. What about buying a property as an income property?
A lot of people want to do that, right? You always hear, hey, I have a way to make money. They see this. They always get a commercial or something on the internet that says, buy a property, get the rent, it'll end up paying. That could be horrible because what you're doing is you become a manager. You just give yourself a full-time job and managing the people in that house.
So what can you do? What are some options? Are there companies that do that?
There's several companies. What I would do, I would always hire an outside company to vet the people inside, make sure that all the stuff is done, like let's say their toilets overflow and they have to get a plumber, and
Correct.
eviction and background investigation. Right. Because what do you do if somebody doesn't pay the rent?
Right.
You're paying this mortgage, and all of a sudden they
Right.
go, hey, I can't pay anymore. I just lost my job, but I'm not leaving.
Correct.
So these are the things that you have to think about
Right.
way ahead, thinking you're just going to get a property, get all this money, and it's going to be easy money. It's never easy money.
Right.
So what I want to talk about now is, what about if you're in a house, 3-bedroom house, and you have 2 bedrooms available, and you want to bring in a renter?
Right.
Okay, that could be a nightmare. That could be really
Yeah, they're going to
good.
rent a room. It's very common.
Remember, it could be really beautiful, and it could be a nightmare.
Right.
So you got a guy in the room, and all of a sudden, he doesn't want to pay you rent, and his door has like 10 deadbolts on it.
Like Get Smart.
Yeah, the old Get Smart, where you have to unlock all these doors, and the guy
Right.
goes, leave me alone. I have my rights.
Right.
That's where it can get complicated.
Okay, I got you.
Well, anyway, we're into the show. Let's bring in Maria and see what stories they have. Talk about this. We could talk about all sorts of bad roommates, landlords.
Correct.
Maria, are you out there?
I am. I'm right here.
So what do you got?
Thank you for having me on again this week.
Absolutely, our
how-
favorite guest.
That was a whole lot of information. I
lot
had
of
PITI. That sounds like a terrible pity. Proof of funds. Poof. Poof. That's what it stands
Yeah,
for. That's
exactly.
where the money went. I don't know. We had a big house in Point Loma, and I often thought about renting a room. So it's funny you bring that up. But I was always held back because my husband has some quirks, including that we can't have any garlic or onions in the house.
Oh, yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
It's like an Italian-free zone.
Wow. Yeah, I couldn't be a roommate, by the way.
Right.
No, you
That's
couldn't even
yeah.
visit.
If I don't
mean,
smell
we'd have
garlic,
to,
I
I'd have to
leave.
go out on the street. We'd have to have coffee on the street.
Exactly.
Plus, I had a bad cat. And this cat was just notorious, and it would go into the laundry, and it would take dirty laundry and just dump it at the front door.
How?
It was not unusual for people to come to the front door and find my dirty underwear, or not that I'm saying my underwear would be dirty, but the laundry underwear that would be at the front door. In fact, if that would happen to a renter, I'd be appalled.
No, exactly. That's not a good welcoming.
No, it's not.
Yeah, well, you can always, if you ever drop your underwear at the front door, you can always blame it on the cat, I guess.
Lovely. I'll tell you another story. When I was growing up, my mother and I, she separated from my dad, and she and I rented a room. She had 2 jobs, and we were in a house, and a lot of other people were renting a room, and that's how the owners were, paying for this big house. But we had to share a kitchen, and we had to share the bathroom. And I'll never forget, I was like 10 years old, and I couldn't time getting into that bathroom right. I would always get there after Mr. Papadopoulos, and he was a little hairy. And so, ashamed to say, embarrassed, I would go in as a kid, come out as a Sasquatch. I couldn't time the bath right. I don't know. But if other people want to rent a room in their house, I think you're right. It seems like it's fraught with possibilities.
It's so true. When you're with your family, you can all yell at each other and still love each other. But if it's with a roommate or a stranger, someone you're trying to live with that you're not related to, it can get really bad really quick. Now, I don't want to object because there's people out there that are having renters in their house, and it works out very well. But what we would like to talk about is stuff that goes wrong in this, because you never think about what can go wrong. You're always thinking about how much money I can get if I just rent 2 rooms. That'll pay my mortgage. I won't have to work anymore. But like you said, all of a sudden the guy comes in, he smells garlic, and he goes, hey, I can't stand that smell. You can't do that. And I have my rights as a renter. Then you got the conflict and the tension in the house. And let's say you want to evict him. What do you do then, Mark?
Well, there's a process for evicting a roommate. It's very complicated, though, because they're living in the house. They typically will have a lease, but sometimes they don't have any lease. So even if you call the police and go, I want to evict this person, they're going to say it's a civil matter. It's not a crime.
Right, again, we got the civil matter.
I got to tell you, I tried to do that with my son. It doesn't work.
Yeah, they won't leave.
Please, now would be a good time. You're really not following the rules. It's time to get out.
Yeah,
well, sometimes you get these roommates that have these very odd hobbies. They collect things, or what if you have a roommate that's studying to be a taxidermist? Something very unusual, things that can go on. So, Frank, how do you make sure they're not doing weird things when they're in the room?
I don't know. That's a good
exactly. A taxidermist is the last thing I did with my cat.
Yeah. If you hear a screaming animal in the middle of the night, you got a problem. But that's what I guess that's why you hire.
Well, here's a big thing. Marijuana is legal now in California. So what if you get a roommate that just decides he just want to keep smoking marijuana every night, and they're smoking in the room, and you can start smelling it? Can you do anything about that?
Well, I don't know. You ask them to share. That would be the first thing.
Pass it
Really? What? You didn't think about the rest of it?
No, exactly.
Well, one of the things you can do on a serious note is say, hey, I don't allow smoking. It causes asthma. There's a lot of stuff where you can protect yourself by the smoke. So if he's chewing gummy bears, I guess that's no big deal.
What if you have a roommate, and in the morning you wake up and you see some guy in a bathrobe that you've never seen before in the house? He's frying eggs and cooking bacon in the kitchen, and you go, who is this guy? And this
I don't know, but he brought bacon, so that's okay with me.
Yeah,
because if they're renting a room, they want to have guests over. Is that okay?
Well, you have to put that on the lease, on the agreement. If you're going to have people spend the night, I would say no. I wouldn't allow that. But there are times where, hey, if you're a human being and you're living somewhere, that you want your boyfriend or girlfriend to spend the night, then why not? It just depends on that.
So here's the advice that you give to people who want to rent a room to a roommate. You have to delineate, write out what they can and cannot do regarding roommates or smoking or pets. And you have to make sure you do that before you rent instead of after.
Let's say you talk about hobbies. Many people like instruments. What if the guy's playing the guitar at midnight because he worked all day and that's when he wants to play his electric guitar?
Everything has to be written out.
You can't do every scenario, but the main ones like smoking, drugs, bringing people over, curfew hours.
Well, do you know why you have to write it, Frank? Can you explain the reason why it has to be in writing?
Well, in real estate, everything has to be in writing. There's a certain code called
the statutes of fraud,
Correct.
Which means you cannot negotiate real estate transactions unless they're in writing. So even if you told the guy, hey, you can't play your guitar at midnight, it had to be in writing for it to be binding.
There's some things where you can
what if you don't know that this person's going to do that, though? I mean, you can't know everything. You can't say, listen, I know you don't do taxidermy now, but you can't do taxidermy here. You could have a list of 1,000 things, all the possibilities. You might, I'm just saying.
Hey, that's a good idea. Maybe we should come up with a book, a volume, and just sign the end of the book that lists every possible thing. Well, that's why there's nightmares, and that's why there's good. That's why you have these stories, because you just don't always know. But these are the things that you should think about. Like there could be stuff I can't even know right now that I can't tell him what not to do, that it's weird. Maybe he's a sleepwalker.
Well, I read the book, My Taxidermist Roommate. Have you ever read that book? It's pretty good.
Mark, stick with real estate, okay? We have the comedians here for a reason.
No, I've definitely not read that book. But someone who might have would now be a good opportunity for me to be able to bring on my guest.
Okay.
Yes, perfect.
Bring him on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited to introduce you to my partner. with my show in San Diego. He's been the producer of the show along with me for almost 10 years, and he performs all over San Diego. It's extremely funny. Please welcome the very funny Al Gabby.
Yay.
Hey,
Hey, thanks.
Good morning.
Thanks for having me, guys.
How are you,
Hi,
Al?
good morning. Good morning.
Good.
I'm doing great. All this talk it's bringing up a lot of memories for me. As a comedian, we tend to rent rather than own. And I actually had an apartment. It was an apartment home, which I don't know what the difference is in an apartment and apartment home. I thought it was, something else. It didn't come with a dog and a fence, but I was staying in this 3-bedroom apartment. We had to lease out one of the rooms. We had to sublease it. Basically, myself and the other roommate were on the lease, but we had an empty room. We needed someone in there. We needed the income, the rental income, and we rented. And there were problems off the bat. The first big problem was they were late on their first month's rent, which caused an issue. And we tried to evict them. Now, this is a couple of comedians trying to evict someone, so we did everything wrong. And you want to know about problems that started. This person didn't want to pay their rent, and when we started making an issue, you're late on your rent, they got upset, and they took away the shower curtain and the toilet paper. I don't know why they did that. I don't know if they thought TP was going to be the currency of the future. Who knows if they were ahead of their time, or if they're going to try and pay me in that. Because right now, I might take that as a down payment.
Yeah.
But at the time, we needed money, and they didn't have it. We were going through back and forth. When we tried to evict them, we went to the main renting office, which they told us, that's your problem. You two are on the lease, and that's the only problem we have. We gave him a verbal notification of, hey, you need to get out of here by the end of the month. He reluctantly agreed. At the end of the month, he really wasn't moving, so we started kind of making moves on our own, trying to move his stuff out. And eventually, the authorities showed up, and they let us know that he was leaving that day, but honestly, he didn't have to, because we did not go to the police department to file an eviction notice. So that 30-day eviction verbally didn't really translate to something that they can enact on to have him removed. And that left us with an issue. We had a lot of issues at that place anyways, because there were some weird rules in that apartment that we had to adhere to. The pet thing was the most interesting thing, because they had a pet policy that says you can have a dog or a cat, I guess, but it went by weight. So any animal between 0 pounds and 15 pounds, it was a $200 deposit, and then you had to pay so much extra per month on rent. And then if the dog was 15 to 25 pounds, you had to pay $100. It started going on like that. So by the time things went on, we did get a dog, but we had that dog on a diet the entire time. I mean, that dog was on keto for a year. Yeah, it was a Great Dane, but we had it down to the weight of a Chihuahua. I mean, it was a fighting little dog. We loved it. We were able to have it. But those kinds of rules were the ones that intrigued me, because I didn't know how enforceable that was. Were they going to come in with a scale and weigh my dog? Should I get it a thinner leash? Should I, maybe try anything to get the weight down? I don't know, but I sure didn't want to pay the extra money.
We just sold a house where the issue was the person buying the house was so scared because the dog was like 4 pounds over the weight limit. And and it's weird because as brokers we can't say don't worry about it, because then we're held liable. So we just just put that thing on a treadmill and reduce the weight. You got to figure it out. We don't want to tell them like they really don't weigh your dog. It's for other reasons, but as brokers, like I said, it's like, well, it has to be this. She bought the house and the dog, but she was so nervous, and no one cared at the end. But
what, you didn't want to introduce her to your taxidermy friends? That would have solved the problem right there, don't you think?
One thing about dogs, some of the the places you rent, they'll have restrictions on pets. However, if you have a pet that's considered a therapy pet or a comfort animal, I believe that there's some laws that protect renters from making them get rid of their pet. I guess you can't.
Well, that's absolutely true. And one thing about if you're from San Diego, you'll notice that they used to be really strict on the dogs on the beach during the day, because some people are just scared of dogs. It's like, hey, you can come before 9 or after 5. But now you see dogs everywhere because everyone has that the dog that's helping them with therapy. So they're just not really enforcing that anymore.
You know what I found also, Frank? I saw one where there was a limit on the number of dogs you could have, but there was no limit. It was in the contract. It said no limits on fish and birds. So if you had an aquarium, you can have as many fish as you want.
Right. Well,
They're
fish,
not.
Are they therapy fish?
it's hard to
I'd
get.
like to have a therapy, and if you're allowed to have therapy animals, I'd like to have a therapy llama.
Oh, that's a nice one.
Or a therapy camel. How about that?
It's
I
hard-
feel better. One hump or two. I don't know. It just depends on the day. Makes me feel better.
It's hard to make a vest for a therapy fish. I think that's the problem. But anyway, winding down, Mark, do you have any final conclusions or final thoughts about this renting?
Final thoughts. If you're buying an income property and you want to know what's best to do, you can always contact the Powell Brothers. You can visit us online at powellbrothersrealty.com, or you can call 858-922-7725, and we will go over all of your questions regarding an income property. What are the pros and cons, where to invest in that, and whatnot. Also, if you have a roommate, a situation that is not going well, or you need to work with somebody who's maybe not paying their rent, if you can also give us a call, we can provide you with resources on where to go to seek help.
Great. Now, Maria, I know you mentioned a little bit that that's your partner and you have a comedy, but I want you to be more specific so people out there listening can actually look you guys up. Can you please give a way to get in touch with you and your partner?
Oh, absolutely. You can find us on comedyheights.com. We're on Comedy Heights on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all of it. And if anyone's interested in a cat, I have a cat.
1 minute.
Al, your social media?
Yes, I'm on social media.
Okay. How do we get in touch with you?
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Find me.
Mine is Al Gavi. It's pretty much Al Gavi, ALGAVI, across the board on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Venmo.
Okay. Thank you so much for visiting My Happy House. Next week we'll have a new comedian and a new issue and a new subject. Thank you so much for tuning in. Say goodbye, Mark.
Goodbye, Mark.
Goodbye.
Thanks so much for joining us today for My Funny House with the Powell Brothers, right here on The Answer San Diego. Join us next week as the Powell Brothers bring you more funny stories of what can go really right and what can go really wrong with home improvements and home ownership, and bring the laughs to you with yet another hilarious guest comedian. To find out more about the Powell Brothers, be sure to check out their website at powellbrothersrealty.com, or you can visit myfunnyhouse.com. Again, thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next week for My Funny House on The Answer San Diego.